Thank you very much, Susie and Patrick. um, this series has a time frame of at least 2 years, and the way we're doing it is probably going to take 3 years to do, but just because of complications of schedules. Just a review for those of you who may not know or who may have forgotten what we're doing here. Patrick has invited Dr. Berger and I to come once a month to talk about emotional sobriety as connected to the steps, emotional sobriety and the steps as revealing core principles for us to practice on an ongoing basis. Now, that's a mouthful if you really heard everything I just said. We have started out with a commentary by me on step one, and then the following month, a commentary by Dr. Berger about step one connected to emotional sobriety. And then the next month, the two of us to talk about step one, emotional sobriety, and the operating principle. Right? You get the kind of the sense of the context of it. I come from a very spiritual perspective, as really revealed to me and embodied to me and expanded to me through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm going to say it in a kind of an awkward way, but even though Dr. Berger is in a 12-step program, he comes from somewhat of a secular standpoint because he's a scientist, he's a clinical psychologist. He has a PhD in clinical psychology and has been practicing for, I'm not sure, but it's certainly over 40 years. And I don't mean to exclude spirituality from secular, nor secular from spirituality, but I am making a contrast. Our two approaches are somewhat different just because of our own personal journeys. He started out as a Marine and became a 12-step person, but became a scientist. I started out as a monk and became a secular person and then became a spiritual person. So it's a nice combination of both information and experiences. Well, having said that, because of our respective schedules, sometimes we keep to the format that I just described, and sometimes we don't. Dr. Berger has had hip surgery recently, and so he's been challenged. And I have done a presentation on steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. Last month, I did a presentation on step 4 as a substitute for the meeting of Dr. Berger and myself to talk about his approach to step 3. And we intended to do that today. About an hour ago, we all found out that that's not going to work. And so I'm going to review step 3 as the step itself, as related to emotional sobriety and the principle that's in it, not to repeat the presentation I did, I'm not sure, 3, 4, 5 months ago, but even if you were there and even if you were paying attention, my presentations are never the same because I'm never the same. I try to share my knowledge and my experience, and this is a distilled version of the approach to step 3. Having said that long introduction, I also want to then say to you, there's going to be more time today at the end of my talk for you to ask questions or share your knowledge or share your experience or share your challenges. So if you have anything that you want to say, please bring it to the group. Don't be bashful about it. It's really important for you stay on track in terms of a focus on emotional sobriety, on step 3, on the core values and principles. Kind of stay within the parameters of that. And we'll have a very robust discussion. I put up the PowerPoint to show you the website that I have that has a lot of resources on the journey, the 12-step journey. Full disclosure, I'm sober in Alcoholics Anonymous since February 21st, 1984. Yes, do the math. I just celebrated 40 years and I'm proud of it, stunned by it, grateful for it, and humbled by it. You can also go to the YouTube channels that I have, a very deep and broad resource center, a library of recordings from my weekly step workshops, which I've been doing for over 25 years, as well as presentations solo on various subjects, as well as the steps, and co-facilitated with several people, not the least of whom is Dr. Berger. He and I have been working together, co-facilitating workshops for the last 20 years. So there's a lot of resources to support any of your inquiries or your curiosities about the big book and or psychology and or spirituality and or emotional sobriety, including such things as forgiveness, inventory, making amends, deep and broad conversations with lots of participation from participants who have asked really wonderful questions from their experience, which helps us then to have broader and deeper information and experience with the process so that we can help people navigate this journey. Principles. Well, look it up in the dictionary. It will really be helpful. My simple definition is that it's a guideline and a guardrail. A guideline, that's the positive. A guardrail, that's the negative. It keeps me from going off the path. Principles. I tell the men I work with and anybody who has questions about their own life and journey, identify the principle. Always take the high road and always be generous. A principle, a core value. Take a look at the exact nature of this material reality. What is the principle? In physics, for instance, there's the principle of gravity. You can't argue with gravity. Sorry. I mean, in the Earth's atmosphere, it's going to be predictable. It's immutable, meaning it doesn't change. It's non-negotiable, meaning it has no reference point to what we need, what we want, what we think, what we feel. Gravity is just gravity. Now, here's really the confrontation with principle and with reality and with nature as it's structured. If you attempt to manipulate reality, you will suffer. If you attempt to change reality, you will be crushed. See, Bill knew that in the 12 and 12 in step 10. I think step 10 is the primary tool of emotional sobriety. He said it's a spiritual principle, a spiritual axiom, same meaning, different word, axiom and principle. It's a spiritual principle. Whenever we're disturbed, there's something amiss with us, not with nature, but my reaction to nature, not with people, my reaction to people, not with circumstances and events, but my reaction to circumstances and events. Nature just manifests 1 second at a time. People and circumstances just manifest 1 second at a time. They are just doing it. When we take it personally, that's when we're out of line. What they're doing, people and circumstances and events, is not personal. That's a huge insight. It didn't come to me in 1984. Probably it was about 10 years ago doing the work with Dr. Berger when I'm 30 years sober and quite awake in terms of the journey of the 12 steps, quite awake. A daily practice since 1989, a daily practice of step 10 and 11 and 12, just like the book asks us to do. We're not cured. We have a daily reprieve. Not cured of what? Unmanageability. No, that's my conclusion. It doesn't say that in the big book, but read pages 60 to 62. Bill didn't structure the big book and the step process formally this way. He introduces pages 60 to 62 as the introduction to step 3. That's what we're going to be talking more specifically about in a minute. And he describes unmanageability. If you haven't had this exercise of reading pages 60 to 62, using the personal pronoun present tense, I not only invite you, but I challenge you to take a look at that from the big book of Alcott. Not now, please don't do that. It'll distract you from what I'll be sharing with you, which might be very helpful to you. I hope it is. But take a look at pages 60 to 62 and insert the personal pronoun, me, my, I, and the present tense, today, not yesterday, not in the past, present tense. And then read it out loud. And then read it out loud. Reading it to yourself and making the changes will have an impact. It will. But when you read it out loud, you will maybe hear it for the first time as I did, reading it out loud, like a 5th step. I spent a lot of time in my 4th step. I got a lot of insight in my 4th step when I'm doing it at home. But when I'm in my sponsors or step guides home and I'm reading it out loud for the very first time consecutively, out loud, all the stuff I had written over weeks or months, and now I'm reading it out loud consecutively, out loud consecutively. I hear it and I have an experience with it for the very first time. You want to know about emotional sobriety? Do that exercise and then challenge yourself with the bedevilments on page 52 in the big book. Bedevilments, to be controlled as if by devils, because they're like puppet strings. I tie strings from me to people. I tie strings from me to circumstances. I tie strings from me to events because I have a story. I have a script. I have an interpretation, but I don't know that I have a story and a script that actually is a myth. I've created it out of thin air by my reactions and my interpretations. And over half of it's just not true. I had the experience of discovering that when I did a 4th step out of the big book with somebody who knew what they were doing, and I was 5 years sober. 5 years sober. I couldn't read the big book on my own, and I discovered that at 5 years of sobriety when somebody showed me what each paragraph meant, what each sentence meant, what each word meant. Unpacking that changed my life. 1989. I was 5 years sober. All right, what an introduction. But I mean, that's really the baseline for understanding what we're talking about in terms of emotional sobriety, not physical sobriety. Physical sobriety has to come first. That's why Bill concludes on page 43. There'll come a time and a place where we have no mental defense against the first drink. And he doesn't talk about addiction again, at least by my interpretation of the structure of the big book. But he introduces unmanageability on page 45 when he's talking about lack of power. And on page 52, when he shows what that looks like in the bedevilments, all part of his preparation for step 2. And then as part of the preparation for step 3, he gives us pages 60 to 62 and concludes on page 62 in the second paragraph. This is structurally so phenomenal an insight that was given to me by the people who took me through the steps. At the end of the second paragraph on page 62, he starts out at the top. Selfishness, self-centeredness is the root of our problem. That's what unmanageability is and means in the big book. Selfishness, self-centeredness. We're hardwired to be selfish and self-centered. And at the end of that second paragraph, he said, and we can't even reduce it much by wishing or trying on our own power. He is preparing us for step 3. And in fact, he says it clearly there. We have to quit playing God. I can't manage my life on my own power. My will, my free will always choose me. It's how I'm wired. It's a survival mechanism, fight, flight, and freeze. I want to, at the deepest primitive level, to survive. And I don't know that I don't know, and I can't see that I can't see. Not poetry. I'm not trying to be cute with my words. I'm trying to embody my experience with this process. It began in 1989 when I did the work the first time. It continued when I did the work the second time 3 years later. It continued and concluded, quite frankly, when I did the work with a different step guide 3 years later. All in all, it was about a 12-year period, 3 different step guides that brought step 1 to me in terms of an experience, which then allowed me to have an experience with steps 2 and 3. 10 years sober. You may be much smarter and much faster or have better teachers than I had. I'm just telling you what my experience is. At 10 years of sobriety, having had 3 spiritual awakenings in 1996, I, for the very first time, established a personal relationship with a God of my not understanding. I was a monk for 7 years. Most of you don't know that. Some of you do. Ages 17 to 24. I was a monk, a cloistered monk, meaning I was silent for 7 years, studying theology, philosophy, and everything else, and spirituality, of course. And I hung up my black robe in 1964 and didn't meditate again for another 25 years. And even in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, mouthing the words of prayers and mouthing the philosophy and theology of the big book and whatever else I understood in my head, but had never processed through my heart. And I was given an experience in step 2 of responding to the question in the big book, God is or God isn't, what is your choice? And seeing that as an act of faith. Not of knowledge, not of certitude, not of feelings, not of emotions. There's a use of my free will. Bill calls it the proper use of our free will. In step 11, he calls it the proper use of our free will. In step 3, he calls it the proper use of our free will. He invites us in step 3. Made a decision. Listen to the words. Why did he choose decision in step 3 and choice in step 2? I don't know, but I'll make it up. A choice in step 2 is an act of faith. Purely and simply empty, invisible, material, immaterial, an act of faith. He says on page 53, God is or God isn't, God is everything or God is nothing. What is your choice? We are confronted with the question of faith. Confront yourself. What do you mean by faith? Look it up in a dictionary. You'll be very frustrated. Dictionaries are very unclear in this area. Faith is trust. Trust is faith. That didn't help. Faith is a choice, according to Bill. What is your choice? Empty. No substance, no certitude, no feeling. I've just made a choice. Why did I make that choice? Because I've had an experience, hopefully in step 1, that in fact I'm hopeless and powerless on my own power. That's the total point of step 1. A complete implosion and a surrender in complete defeat. That's where the word surrender belongs, in step 1, not in step 3. I don't have any problem with the applications of the words, and the word surrender is not even in the big book. But I use the word surrender in step 1 because of the complete defeat, a process of implosion, an organic one understanding of what it means to be an addict. When I start, I cannot stop, and when I stop, I cannot stay stopped on my own power. No choice. That's what it means. No choice. And then unmanageability, which Bill unpacks as he prepares us for steps 2 and 3, as I indicated. At the bottom of page 62, in that second paragraph, he said, we don't have any choice over not being self-centered. Now, on page 43, he concludes, concerning addiction, we need God. And that launches us onto step 2. On page 62, he reinforces that we can't even reduce our self-centeredness much by trying on our own will. We need God's help. And he launches us into step 3 by saying, we need to quit playing God. Well, hopefully I've tied some of that exposition in the big book together. Step 3, made a decision. In contrast to step 2, Bill uses choice in step 2. He uses a different word. I believe, because he is a wordsmith, that he had a different meaning for it. Step 2 has no connotation. It just is a simple act of my will, a choice. God is. Step 3, read page 58. If you want what we have and are willing to go to any length, then you are ready to take certain steps. That's the preparation for step 3. Decision is a choice put on steroids because it's connected to a commitment of action. The actions of steps 4 through 9. If you want what we have and are willing to go at any length, then you are ready to take certain steps. Step 3 is that introduction. Maybe that's why step 3 doesn't have an amen. I pay attention to these things. I believe it's significant. Step 3 has no amen because it's my interpretation, it's the beginning of a process of bringing in light to diminish the darkness. That's a new metaphor that I like to use because it's so graphic. I commit to the step 4, 5, 6, and 7 as that next stage in the process of turning, made a decision to turn from my self-centeredness to other-centeredness, a God I do not understand. Steps 4 through 7, and I again confront my powerlessness in steps 6 and 7, but I have a willingness of step 6 and a prayer of step 7. That's what it is. You can name your character defects. You can be appalled and embarrassed by them, but good luck, you can't change them. I can't change them. I am powerless over my character defects. And so Bill gives us a prayer, my creator, in step 7, doesn't he? My creator. That's no accident. My creator. I recognize that I've been made with some deficiencies. It's not a deficiency on the part of the creator. It's a deficiency of my materiality. My materiality blocks me from immateriality. That was the saying of Carl Jung. Spiritus contra spiritum, Jens's letter to Bill Wilson. That's a Latin phrase. The spirit is the antidote to spirits, spiritus. The Greek and Latin words for the derivative root word of it is breath, spirit, spiros, the breath. Spirit with a capital S is the antidote to spirits. Yeah, pun intended. Spirits meaning the equivalent of alcohol. We're material beings who make the mistake that there is a material solution, and the real solution is an immaterial solution. That's the point of Carl Jung's letter. And we have this deep thirst and this deep hunger for a solution and a relationship with the immaterial. But we don't know that we don't know, and we can't see that we don't see. And we do everything to find a material satisfaction for this itch in our soul. And there's no material satisfaction. It doesn't matter how much money and how much power and how much whatever else is available in the material world. There will be this level of angst, this level of discomfort, this level of restless, irritable, and discontented. Dr. Silkworth's phrase for unmanageability. Restless, irritable, and discontented. Until, in fact, we have this phenomenal relationship that's available to us, that's promised to us in step 3. Step 3, a decision to turn our will, that is my ability to choose, and my life, my ability to act, over to the care of God. Notice, please, the key word that is so left out in so many conversations in the rooms. We do not turn our will and our life over to God. God does not manage our lives, or at least this is my interpretation. I feel strongly about it, obviously. We are invited to manage our lives in partnership with God. I can't manage my life on my own power, but I am invited to manage life in partnership with the Spirit. Read page 75, the meditation and the promise at the end of the 5th step. Walking hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. Oh my God, it doesn't get any more comforting than that. Walking hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. God's my managing partner. That's why I sit in the morning in my step 11 meditation, to get guidance from my manager, the source of my knowledge and the source of my power. Look at step 11 itself, how it ends. Praying for knowledge of God's will. I need to know what to do. But most of us know what to do and we don't do it. So the end of step 11 is really the most powerful part, and the power to do that. I need knowledge, but I need power from a power other than myself, the source of all knowledge. Now, the big book suggests as we understand God, and I love it because it makes it all inclusive. There's no impediments. There's no exclusivity to the big book and the 12-step culture. It's totally inclusive because you are the one that makes a decision about your relationship with power. Step 3 is a decision to turn to have a relationship with this power. You prayed that set aside prayer. It's magical. At least my experience is it's somewhat magical. And I use that as a synonym for mysterious, or even a synonym for mystical. You could look those words up. Mystical, mysterious, magical. This is not Disney, though. This is not fairy dust. I can attest to that with the walk of my own personal life for the last 35 years. I have managed my life, sometimes not as well as other times. The most important part of this journey for me is having a sponsor to whom I'm accountable and a step guide who gives me some direction as to how to interpret and unpack and incorporate and practice the material in the big book. I'm reasonably intelligent, fairly well educated, and I could not read the big book, even though it's in English, and understand it on my own. I was in book studies and step studies for those first 5 years, and I could do this. I'm articulate, blah, 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 blah. And I was sincere. I was just empty, though, and I didn't know that I didn't know. That in fact I had a lot of academic knowledge, but I had no experience. I had a lot of information, but I had no transformation. That's my first step guide told me with that kind of demonstration. So step 3 is about trust. Step 1, I'm hopeless, powerless. I do not have the power to choose. I have free will, but my free will is deficient with regard to addiction. That's that delusion and obsession. And my free will is deficient with regard to the bedevilments, the unmanageability. There's a hole in my soul. Pascal said it so beautifully in one of his comments, a 19th century philosopher of some kind, Pascal. The hole in our soul is in the shape of God. The same thing that Jung said that I talked about just a little bit ago. Step 1, I have an innate deficiency. It's not that I'm defective in the sense of a human being. I'm as human as the next person, but every one of us is defective. 1 out of 10 is addictive. 9 out of 10 are okay, but 10 out of 10 have the problem of unmanageability. I don't need to comment on that if you're familiar with the news for the last 2,000 years. Unmanageability is human nature. And then Bill invites us to think about the relationship with the universe, with life itself. How does your life look? Are you having the outcomes of all your thinking and all your behavior that you want? Or is there something amiss? It's a trick question to this group. You wouldn't be here if the answer was no, I don't have any trouble with my life. Who comes and sits and listens to these presentations of hope and experience? But the walking wounded and the mad dog seekers. That's my favorite phrase that was given to me by one of my step guides. A deep, affectionate term, a total compliment. Mad dog seekers. Yes, we're on fire because We know that there's a solution and we can reduce the suffering, both ours and then the people who we encounter. Step 2 is the hope that there is a solution in the universe. The principle of step 2 I see is hope. Faith, of course, as a choice based on hope that it's real. And then step 3 is trust, which means I put it into action. I behave that way. Step 2 says, I believe God is. Step 3 is, and I'm going to act as if it's true. I'm going to act. I have no information. I have no certitude. I have no feeling. I have no emotion. There is no evidence in my life. But with all this emptiness and invisibility and immateriality, I'm going to go, yes, yes, I will take these instructions. Yes, I will do inventory. Yes, I will do transparent disclosure. Yes, I will make a list of my character defects. Yes, I will pray for their removal and I will hold myself accountable for my behavior. You may never have heard that with regard to step 7 because it's not in the big book or in the 12 and 12, but it's absolutely my experience. This man helped me understand that I am powerless over my inclinations, but I am 100% responsible for the behavior that comes from them. I pray because I'm powerless. I pray for the change in my inclinations and also the change in my behavior. And then I hold myself accountable on a daily, weekly, monthly, whatever the substance of the situation is, to somebody for my behavior. I pray because I'm powerless. I hold myself accountable because I'm human. Step 3 is a decision because it connotes my act of my free will connected to a commitment to action. At the minimum, stage 2 in the rocket launch, steps 4 through 7, a relationship with myself. I've already established a relationship with the mystery, steps 2 and 3, stage 1 of the rocket launch that Bill talks about on page 25, rocketed into the 4th dimension. Yeah, the immaterial dimension, the world of the spirit. Bill confirms that at the end of the 9th step, doesn't he? Page 84. We have entered the world of the spirit. After finishing step 7, then we are launched into the final stage of the recovery process, steps 8 and 9, and we're placed in orbit as we're doing step 9, but certainly by the end of step 9, we're placed in orbit around the light. That's my mental image of this journey, put into the words that express it very awkwardly, but I think adequately. Trust is the primary principle of, or value of, or core principle of step 3, meaning I'm acting as if it's all true. Step 3, a decision for a relationship with power. Made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. That's the relationship, a caring relationship. Is that what you have? A personal, caring relationship with a power deep inside yourself? Read page 55 in reference to step 2. There's a full paragraph there that with this attitude, you cannot fail. Thinking honestly, searching diligently, searching fearlessly. A choice of a relationship with this power in step 3. A caring relationship. Step one, I don't have sufficient power on my own. Step two, there is a power deep down inside of me. Read Appendix 2. Unsuspected inner resource. Unsuspected inner resource. I didn't know that that was where I would find the Spirit. Inner, deep down inside of me, as a resource of power, and that I could have a personal relationship with it by making a decision and by taking some actions. Trust. Translating this choice and then this decision into action, into behavior. Bill calls it the keystone. Let's take a look at the arch that he refers to. I believe on page 25, he talks about step one. Actually, step two in on page 47. Again, making notes, not looking at these entries, please, at this point. He doesn't tell us about step one being the foundation, but I'm assuming when he says in step two that we're building an arch through which we walk to a new freedom on page 47, and that willingness is the cornerstone, that first stone placed on the foundation that sets the direction of the building of the entire arch. And then step three, that decision connected to action, he says, is the keystone, meaning it holds the entire arch together. My first sponsor used the term linchpin. He was more mechanically oriented than construction oriented. Linchpin, that device that holds all of the moving parts together so that whatever the mechanical device is, it works well and integrated. Step three. I pray that step three every morning after my set-aside prayer, which sets me up for my morning meditation. I pray my version of the third step prayer, which changes each day so that I stay sharp and conscious of its content. There's the prayer in the big book is fabulous. Step three, page 63. But the biggest gift that this man gave me, who took me through the steps the first time, was he said, rewrite it in your own language. And when not to improve it, he said, but to understand it. When I have to put the words in the book in my own language, I have to understand the words in the book. I rewrite it not to improve it, but to understand it, to have a relationship with it. For freedom. I'm going to go back to the slide because I looked at it just too quickly. Well, it's about freedom. Step three is the decision for a relationship of alignment. Now, that's a word that's not in the big book, nor have I used it in my comments yet today. But from my standpoint, it's the heart of emotional sobriety, to be in alignment with reality as it is, to go with the flow. You've heard the terms, to go with the flow. What does that mean? Reality is in flow right now, 1 second at a time. It is evolving. Right now, I'm growing. Right now, I'm deteriorating. Right now, I'm dying in front of you. It'll be another 10 years, I'm hoping, maybe 15. These are the realities, and they're incontrovertible, they're non-negotiable, they're immutable, meaning they don't change. Nature just evolves. Darwin saw that, right? We're all in the evolution of material reality. And all we can do in the Serenity Prayer is so beautiful when you understand it. There's no control. Lose the word. There's no control. I don't control my car. I influence how it drives, but there's so much traffic outside and the car itself is mechanical and it could fail me at any time. I influence the Serenity Prayer. What can I influence and what can't I influence? You know how I learn? by making mistakes and correcting the mistakes. That's the benefit of step 10. That's the benefit of emotional sobriety. When I make a mistake, I have tools of course correction. And when I correct them and the outcome improves, then I can, in fact, learn and grow in wisdom. Alignment. When I go against reality, as I mentioned in my opening comments, I will be crushed. If you attempt to defeat gravity, you will die. If you attempt to defeat life or reality by manipulating it to your wants and needs, your feelings, your understandings, you will be unhappy at the very least. You will suffer at the very most. You've heard it phrased perhaps in the rooms. Pain is inevitable. That's just goes with life. Scott Pett's book, The Road Less Traveled. Life is difficult. The very first line, it became very famous because it's like, wow, in your face. Life is difficult. Pain is inevitable because we're material beings in a material world. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Suffering is my attitude about pain. Suffering is my attitude about reality. Suffering is my attempt to bend reality to my wants and needs, and I will lose every time. Read Byron Katie, Loving What Is. She came at it from a completely different standpoint, not religion, not psychology, not a 12-step addiction. She had her own experience and she has her own vocabulary. That's what makes it so rich because it's so parallel to our experience in the 12-step community, loving what is. She said, reality is reality. I mean, can you hear the simplicity of this? Reality is reality, but only 100% of the time. I hope you smiled because alignment is what step 3 is all about. It's my commitment. I don't do it in step 3. I commit to being in relationship with power that will, in fact, turn me. I make a decision to turn, and I discover by step 7 that I am turned to be in alignment with reality over to the care of God. Like your GPS, get in your car. You know where you're going. You have the address. You drive the car. You have the keys. You have the document that says you're the owner and you have insurance on it, I'm hoping. But you don't know how to get there. So what do? You insert the address in the GPS and then you listen to the directions. Take the 405 south, get off at Northridge. Turn left. Oh, you made a mistake. Make a U-turn. Follow directions and you will get to where you're going. GPS. God positioning system. They're not my words. I get them from everybody around the community. But when I make mistakes and I course correct, I learn because I get better outcomes and I progressively get better outcomes. Therefore, I progressively become a better person. Bill says, progress, not perfection. And there's a saying about practice makes perfect. No, it doesn't. There's no such thing as perfect except God as I don't understand it. Practice makes progress. Practice makes progress. And that's what Bill asks us to do at the end of step 9, doesn't he? We have a daily reprieve. We're not cured of our unmanageability, a daily reprieve because we perceive reality incorrectly and we make mistakes because we take actions based on a lie. And when we make mistakes, meaning we don't get what we had hoped for or what we wanted or we know other people have gotten, we have to challenge ourselves with our thoughts and our feelings, our perceptions and our actions. And if we can hold ourselves accountable to a third party, we will learn faster because we will learn from their mistakes and or from their successes. And we sit in the presence of power every morning in step 11. and we get guidance, and our intuition grows. Bill says this is the proper uses of our mind. This is the proper use of our will. Read pages 85 to 88. The proper use of our mind is to know God's will. That is reality as it's being unpacked. And to listen to the wee small voice, the tiny whispering sound for guidance. And then course correct when we're disturbed, because that's the signal we're out of alignment. Step 3 principle is trust. Trusting yourself that you've been given the tools to come to a decision about your lack of power in step 2, that there just might be a power other than yourself, and that's our hope. And in step 3, you make a decision to take the actions of 4 through 7 at the very least. And we trust the book, and we trust the community, and we trust the guide. We trust the universe. We trust ourselves, and we trust life. And we trust this God of our lack of understanding. Because we want to have a relationship with life, and we want to have a relationship with ourselves. And eventually we want to have a healthy relationship with others, that final stage of the rocket launch. The proper use of our will is to be in alignment with reality. That's emotional sobriety, to be in alignment with reality. I know I'm out of alignment with reality when I suffer. No. It's that simple. Anytime you're suffering, I don't mean pain, suffering, out of alignment with reality. And that's the invitation to become more conscious and to change your behavior. To become more conscious and to change your behavior. Step 10. All right. Well, that was different. That was personal. That was experiential. That was really dense. And I hope it was helpful. Thank you.